by brilliant. Last weekend, nearly 200 million Europeans went to the polls to elect the 720 members of the European Parliament. Going into the election, the big story was about how the polls were predicting a surge for the so-called far right. But while the right did make gains, their success was mostly driven by electoral dynamics in just a couple of countries, notably France and Germany, and the overall picture was complicated by a more general fragmentation of European politics. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what happened at last weekend's election, why it was a good result for the right, at least in some countries, and what might happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a bit of context, because European elections are relatively complicated. Between June the 6th and June the 9th, 27 EU countries went to the polls to elect the 720 members of the European Parliament. That's 15 more MEPs than in 2019, but less than the 751 MEPs who were in the Parliament before Brexit. These 720 seats are apportioned roughly relative to each country's population size, although smaller EU member states generally get slightly more seats per capita. France, Germany, Spain and Italy, for instance, all have around 800,000 people per MEP, while the EU's smallest members, namely Estonia, Cyprus, Luxembourg and Malta, all have less than 200,000 people per MEP. Nonetheless, the big EU countries still have by far and away the most seats in the Parliament, which means that what can look like European-wide trends are sometimes actually just country-level trends. For instance, it looks like the Renew group lost a fair number of seats this time round, but this is mainly because of Macron's Renaissance-led coalition, which has become significantly less popular since the last European elections in 2019. Anyway, the other important thing to understand is that MEPs and their parties usually form larger European-level groups, which include more than one European party. MEPs are incentivised to organise intergroups for a variety of reasons. Not only is there a political advantage to working together with like-minded colleagues, but groups also have some formal privileges within the Parliament, including a staff allocation and financial subsidies. A group must have at least 23 MEPs from at least 7 different member states. Currently, there are 7 groups in the chamber. From left to right, these are the Left, the Green European Free Alliance, the Socialists and Democrats, Renew Europe, the European People's Party, the European Conservatives and Reformists, and Identity and Democracy. Groups elect MEP leaders who enjoy certain procedural powers, but the de facto leader is usually the leader of the biggest party within that group. For example, Giorgia Meloni is widely considered the de facto leader of the ECR, while Macron is widely considered the de facto leader of Renew. Anyway, going into the election, the composition of the European Parliament was as follows. The EPP had 176 MEPs, the Socialists and Democrats had 139, Renew had 102, the Greens had 71, the ECR had 69, Identity and Democracy had 49, the Left had 37, and the remaining 62 MEPs were what's known as non-inscrits, i.e. without a group. According to current projections, as of Monday morning, after this weekend's elections, this is how things have changed. The EPP won 8 more seats, taking their total to 184. The Socialists and Democrats have maintained the same number of MEPs with 139, although because the Parliament has grown in size, this means that their share of MEPs has slightly fallen. Renew have lost 22 MEPs, taking their total to 80. The ECR won 4 more seats, taking their total to 73. Identity and Democracy won 9 more seats, taking their total to 58. The Greens lost 19 seats, taking their total to 52. The Left lost 1 seat, taking their total to 36. And the number of non-inscript MEPs rose by 36, for a total of 98. Now, in general, we should be wary of drawing definite conclusions from these results, because voters in different countries treat these elections very differently. In some countries, European elections are treated as distinctly European, with voters supporting parties that they think best affect their preferred EU-level policies. In others, EU elections are treated as essentially domestic affairs, with voters using them to express satisfaction or dissatisfaction with their incumbent national government. And in some countries, there's very little interest in European elections at all. which is sort of understandable, given that, according to various studies, a large number of European citizens neither care about them nor understand them. Nonetheless, there are at least two pretty clear trends at the European level. The first is fragmentation. This is most obviously apparent in both the fact that only the EPP has more than 20% of all MEPs, and we now have 4 groups with between 50 and 80 MEPs, but also in the number of non-inscrit MEPs, which has increased dramatically. There's also been fragmentation within and between groups. As we've covered in a previous video, the European right is divided on a variety of issues, including Ukraine and European integration. But the European centre is also increasingly divided. For instance, the coalition that backed von der Leyen in 2019, which mostly comprised the EPP, the Socialists and Democrats and Renew, is increasingly divided over stuff like the Green New Deal, immigration and further European expansion. This means that even though they collectively won a majority, governing would be more difficult this time around. The second is a shift to the right. Every group to the right of Renew won seats, while every group to the left of, and including Renew, saw their share of MEPs decrease, with an especially sharp drop for both Renew and the Greens. It's also worth noting that the non-inscrit group mostly included parties on the European right, like Germany's AfD, Hungary's Fidesz, and Poland's Confederation, who could plausibly join or cooperate with either Identity and Democracy or the ECR in the future, or even form their own new group. Interestingly, a lot of this was driven by electoral dynamics in France and Germany. The right actually underperformed the polls in a whole load of countries, including Belgium, Poland and Sweden. In Italy, while Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia did impressively well with 29% of the vote, she mostly stole votes from other right-wing parties, and the combined vote share of Fratelli d'Italia and Lega was unchanged on 2019. However, the right did especially well in France and Germany. In France, Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National won a 31% plurality, more than double that of Macron's Renaissance-led coalition, who only just beat the Socialists. Macron's collapse also mostly explains why Renew lost so many seats, and the appalling results provoked him into calling snap elections, essentially daring the French electorate to actually put Le Pen in power. In Germany, not only did the centre-right Christian Democrats come first with a massive 30% plurality, but despite a series of scandals, the far-right AfD also came second, beating Scholz's Social Democrats by a couple of percentage points. This was a truly terrible night for Germany's governing coalition, with all 3 parties losing significant ground on 2019. Similarly, Green and far-left parties actually outperformed the polls in a handful of European countries, including the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark and Finland. But their gains here were more than offset by the collapse of the French and German Greens, who both saw their vote share roughly halved compared to 2019. All in all, while the right definitely performed well, the aggregate number disguises some pretty significant intra-European variation, and the Parliament's wider fragmentation promises to make governing and choosing a new Commission president remarkably difficult. So subscribe to stay updated with the upcoming chaos. Now, understanding exactly what has or is going to happen here can be a little tricky, requiring you to evaluate lots of information from different, often partial sources. It would be sensible then to begin improving your critical thinking skills so that you can keep sharp and better understand what's going on. And well, our sponsor Brilliant.org can help you do just that. Brilliant is the online learning platform that's designed specifically to teach you everything from maths, data analysis, programming and AI from the ground up. You don't need a fancy degree or to have dedicated hundreds of hours to studying any of these. All you need is a device with an internet connection and a few spare minutes a day. And with your spare few minutes, you'll learn by actually doing, with Brilliant providing hands-on lessons that let you play around with concepts, a method that has been shown to be 6 times more effective than just watching lectures. What makes this even better is that this content is created by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft and more. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days. Just click on the link in the description. That way you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.